The Spin-off Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spin-off's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by The Spin-off with help from Callaghan Innovation. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
In a few years' time, once enough cars are autonomous and car ownership has collapsed, and we're turning roadside car parks into bike lanes and garages into 4-storey apartments, we will look back and wonder at how much space was left vacant, just waiting for these cars that only ever got driven for 5% of the time. It's bananas. And some people didn't have to wait till the future to see this. They looked at all that time, space and capital sitting inefficiently a bit earlier. The big names, you know, Uber and Airbnb, are standard bearers for this sharing economy, taking what's underused and sharing the usage. Locally, in the car park space, we also have a very cool company doing just this, called Parkable. They take your empty car parks and match them with parkers who pay a fee. They market, provide the tech, clip the ticket, and help the world squeeze some more efficiency out of the model. Parkable are run by Brodie Nelson on the technical side and Toby Litton on the commercial side. And we've got them on today to chat through that idea about seizing the moment and their new app, Campable, opening up spots all over the country to mobile homes and vans of travellers. That's going to be something that provides vineyards, maraes and paddocks with a new income stream and hopefully will put an end to pooping in public car parks. Thanks for joining us today, gentlemen.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having us on.
Hey, tell us, how did you guys come to be making mobile apps?
Well, I've been making mobile apps for quite a few years now. I was doing it in the UK, working for other people, making other people's apps. But when I returned to New Zealand, I got together with this gentleman, Toby Litton, and we thought, hey, let's have a crack at doing something for ourselves.
What was the spark that got the Parkable idea along? Was that something you'd been mulling over for a while?
No, the pain of parking. A few things went down, really. There's a third co-founder of the business. He had a pretty nasty parking experience, shared it with me. And I came back around that time to about $180 worth of tickets on my front windscreen, and I thought, this sucks. So it was the user side, the parking side, that sort of led to there's got to be a better way. And then when we looked around at what's going on, as you say, the sharing economy, and sort of saw the opportunity.
And this was a couple of years ago that you guys launched?
About 2 years ago.
Yeah, and it seems kind of amazing that there wasn't something bubbling up, because 2 years ago, I think Uber was probably the biggest story in the world.
Sure. I mean, when we first launched, there was a couple of other players in the space, but they seem to have fallen away in New Zealand. But we have a lot of similar businesses popping up all over the world on our radar quite regularly, but we just keep doing what we're doing and try to be the best, I guess.
How many people, and this is something that lots of people with an idea that has such potential to free up so much space, how many people come up to you and go, oh, I had that idea?
Oh, about 1 in 3.
Yeah, quite a few.
What is it, do you reckon, that like is the difference between having the idea and the fact that you guys actually went out and did it?
Well, I say this to people because people come to me a lot with app ideas because I make apps, and what I generally say is a good idea is great, but it's the absolute minimum. You need to execute really well, and then you need to bring it to market really well. So people are very protective of their idea. They don't want to share it. I think that's nonsense. You should just go out and validate your idea, talk to people, get honest feedback. The idea by itself is really not worth that much.
How do you guys execute then? Because I imagine it takes... I imagine it's quite hard to get that off the ground. Like, what do you do first?
So in the early days of Parkable, it was really just us sitting around my kitchen table, so that we didn't have a lot in the way of development muscle apart from myself. But the second time around with Campable was a lot easier because we had some infrastructure and we were able to... We had a bigger team to build it, right? So
let's jump back to those early days of the Parkable with how you first got that infrastructure up. Like, what were the first things that you did that got the idea working? Because you'd have to go out and approach people to ask if you could use their car parks, and you'd have to get users on board.
Yeah, working's a big word. We tried a lot of stuff in the early days, and some of it was a dismal failure. We had high hopes on good old fashioned things like flyer drops and all kinds of stuff around, getting the message out to people, and fail. But in the early days, really, it was a whole lot of time beating the street, talking to a huge amount of people. We built a great team early. We got some really great early staff members that made a huge difference. One of whom started as an intern and is now with us today as our marketing manager. Absolutely stand out. So great people around us, and long, hard hours, getting out after hours, literally walking the streets, chatting to people, handing out flyers, just to understand, get some insight, and then feed that back into the product that we were building to make it better digitally,
And we had this sort of preconception, which turned out to be a misconception, that Parkable would be around event parking. The events are where there's a lot of pressure on space, and we thought, next to the stadium, and it'll be all driveways, and that's going to be what the business is. And it turns out that's not what the business was at all. We're much more focused on commuter parking these days. But back then we launched around an All Blacks match, and we thought this is going to be great. And it was so much hard work for not a lot of repeat custom. So, it was good to validate those misconceptions. And
we found a way to scale our business. We just need an All Black test every day of the week.
Yeah, exactly. A big one. Yeah.
And in terms of your business, how's it mainly shaking down? Is it like people getting a space 5 days a week to commute to, or is it people kind of heading into the city and be like, I've got a meeting and I don't want to pay those Wilson bastards?
The motivations are varied. A lot of people don't really like the incumbents like Wilson, so they think they're a pack of assholes, really, and I would agree. Now, I guess in terms of the shape of our business, as a result of that, a big part of it is commuter parking, as Brady said, north of 80%, about 84% commuter parking, and the rest is sort of weekend and entertainment parking, as we call it, and event parking, like games and gigs and whatnot.
Yeah, and is it one-off, or is it like arrangements?
No, really interesting behaviours and some really cool stuff to see around sort of people's choices when it comes to driving, which we really support. So, people are parking about 1.2 days a week, but they're parking repetitively. So they'll drive to town once a week, 1 day out of 5, which we think is really cool. So it means that parking can become part of the commuter mix rather than all of it, and, get more cars off the road, which is good.
What kind of places have surprised you? So I imagine that it's kind of like there's the odd sitter, which would be a place that had a garage out front that was right off Ponsonby Road or something. But what kind of parking situations have surprised you?
Duxie's mum.
Yeah.
So one of our developers, his mother, in early days, in support of the business, listed her driveway, and it's down in Onehunga, which for those who don't know is kind of a suburb, 15-20 minutes out of the centre or CBD of Auckland. She listed her driveway, and she got a regular daily parker paying like $3 a day to park way out there in the suburbs. It was crazy. So that was a big surprise, and we're starting to see, we call them pockets, but these pockets emerging, which are little areas of activity where there's for whatever reason there's pressure on parking infrastructure and therefore demand.
Yeah, how do you get that kind of network effect, or I guess there must be thresholds where people will only pull out the app and use it if they feel confident if there's going to be options.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we try and do is get a lead host, a sort of a larger host, and then we backfill with smaller hosts around it. So, a good example is K Road. We've got a big church up there that has 40 or 50 spaces, and then on the days where there's a funeral and that park is closed, we've got enough smaller parks around that our regulars, can just choose another option. So that's really important to have a cluster.
And from getting it established in Auckland and having those kind of areas of density, what have you found about what it takes to scale that idea? Is this something where you now have a model where you can take 50 people and open up a new city?
Yeah, we're testing our scaling ideas now. So we launched in Wellington relatively recently, starting to build some scalable. It's really all about sales systems and marketing systems, and we believe we're getting there. Every day's a learning day, but we're getting some good early results. We're getting a lot of approaches from territories that want to open alongside, want to partner with us to open in their region. We've recently had approaches out of Christchurch, for example. But I think there's a lot of room to improve always. We're probably 80% of the way there.
What about people trying to buy you? Do you have people coming out of the woodwork and going, one of the 3 people, one of the 1 in 3 who come up to you and say, I had that idea? Do they say, I had that idea, but I didn't build it. Can I buy in?
We get a lot of investment interest. Outright sale, no, we're not really in the market for that at the moment. But in terms of investment, we get a lot of people asking to be a part of the business. And we're very not only open to that, but we sort of encourage broad ownership of our business. We think that's the future. Having a lot of interested parties, it's a team effort. Our investors are an integral part of our business.
And our investors bring other opportunities with them. I mean, we've one of our most recent investors has created some opportunities for Toby to go up to China this week and meet a few interested parties who are interested in licensing Parkable up there. That's the kind of skill set we want on our investment board.
That is really exciting, as the idea obviously can work anywhere that there's car parks. Are there big international competitors who are entrenched? Is there already an Uber of car parking Ubers?
Globally, no. Regionally, yes. Parking's very much a regional game. It's not like you pick up your car and you take it on a plane with you. So generally speaking, you look for parks and your parking behaviour is in and around the area where you live. So what this creates is a lot of regional sort of dominance for players like us. So in the UK, there's a great business going, and we're watching them really closely. There's an emerging business coming out in the US now from this coast of the US. And in Australia, there's been a couple of attempts. Whether or not they're going to get any traction remains to be seen.
And the cool thing is where you've got that licensing, things that you can do without having to actually go and set up, but also how it's led to Campable, which did that emerge from people trying to park their camper vans in people's driveways?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, we responded to user demand, and I had another website, or I still have a website called happycamping.co.nz, and at the time I was thinking, I know I should turn this camping review website into a sharing economy platform. And then I thought, hang on a minute, I already have a sharing economy platform. It's called Parkable. And so I spoke to Toby and said, well, maybe we should do something with motorhomes and motorhome travellers, because I think New Zealand has a lot of amazing, unique properties that would be awesome to open up to tourists. That's where it sort of came from. And then we decided, it's too different from Parkable. Let's just break it out and make a whole new thing.
And how did you guys get that up and going? Because you've had some amazing pickup, haven't you? 1,000 users in your first week, which is amazing.
So again, that was a very different proposition, as Brody said, and we realised we needed quite a different platform for it, digital platform, very experiential on the camping side as opposed to parking's transactional, right? So the first thing we realised we'd need would be more resource. So we reached out to some of our investors, and were fortunate enough to find a new investor who comes from the tourism industry, who immediately bought into the idea. So that gave us quite a bit of funding to help with the build and the launch. And then it was really take all of the learnings that we could from that investor and their networks, build that into what has turned into, I think, a great not really a minimum viable product, but actually a great mature product that we've launched with.
It's quite hard to build a minimum viable product for a sharing economy platform because there's so many interrelated parts. You can't just build the part for the hosts or the part for the guests. You have to have it all working together. So,
And if you're wanting to showcase kind of why would I pay to stay in this place, you can't just have a text description. You'll need to have the images, you have to have the map, and I suppose that must be a nice little moat for you guys if someone is coming to look to jump into this space.
Yeah, it's it's with tech, that sort of IP space and protection space is always difficult, but we've certainly got a good run on it, and I think that competitive advantage, that moat you talk about. There's kind of lots of elements to that. One of which is having a great digital product, one of which is having great people, and one of which is having awesome process and execution. And I think we're lucky enough to have some great people around us that are helping with all three of those things. So yeah, and then outside of that, it's just that execution. Work hard, do what you say you're going to do, get it done on time. The good basic stuff.
What are some of the cool listings that you guys have on Campable? Because I'd imagine that with Parkable, there weren't kind of like unique decorated parking spaces.
But something really funny happened in the first week when, at the time, every new property that was listed was appearing in the featured category, just because we wanted to see what was coming up, and so that meant the newest properties were getting the most prominence on the platform, and this group listed their property, and it was a naturist park, and there was a lot of photos of people in spa pools and
having a great time.
Blurry photos of people sitting around, sort of
barbecuing,
and it was pretty funny.
That's a health risk.
Yeah, well, that's what we were thinking. What's the health and safety?
But it looked great. It was in the mountains. It looked beautiful. I think that Toby, as the director of the business, should secret shopper and
no one wants to see that, mate.
Have you guys done a bit of that?
Yeah, so our investor's actually a motorhome rental company, Wilderness, and they encouraged us to get out and actually, test the product, get into the field and see what it's like. And so I was lucky enough to go away with my wife and some friends in a state-of-the-art motorhome, and we had a great experience. We stayed with a couple on a farm stay just near Hobbiton because we had some kids with us and they wanted to go to Hobbiton. So we're actually staying on the next farm over, which is pretty amazing. And they were very friendly. And then the next night we had a completely different experience. We stayed in a Wairaki resort, which is a big lodge, and took advantage of the thermal pools and the bar and the restaurant. And it was great.
Mm-hmm. What does it cost? Because the thing that jumps to mind is kind of the tourists pooing in public car parks because they're so cheap they won't even pay to go to a traditional motor home area.
Sure.
I mean, who's your customer, and do they have loos here that they can use?
So lots of things in there, I suppose. Firstly, yes, some of the properties have toilets and whatnot, but just backing up a second, when you hear about things like people pooing in the front lawn or pooing in the reserve or whatever, we take the view that that's a capacity problem, which means there's not enough spaces for these to go that are at the right price point. Now, freedom camping's one thing, but what we're learning really quick is that people are actually willing to pay, albeit it might be a modest amount for some sites if there's not a lot of facilities, but they're willing to pay for this, and so it's more a function of just giving them the opportunity. The freedom camping sites are absolutely chocker, they're mirror to mirror, and often it may not be the type of person you want to hang out with. If you're a backpacker, you may want to party. If you're a 40-something tourist in a self-contained motorhome, you may want that seclusion or that maybe local connection, and that's what we're trying to provide, is a lot of breadth of option.
And I think that that's what people are coming to New Zealand for, is this pristine, natural experience. And then if you're cheek to jowl with, someone else from Munich right next to you, that's maybe not what you came here for.
Yeah.
So
have you guys got a contingency plan for Code Brown? If someone complains that people have come in and cracked in their veggie garden?
Yeah. So the platform has two-way reviews. So the host reviews the guest and the guest reviews the host. And so would be having some pretty strong conversations and kicking people off the platform, I think, if they were misbehaving. But so far, so good, right? We haven't had any problems. And we've learned from Parkable that is quite a powerful way to moderate the community, have it self-regulating a little bit.
That's magic, and that idea of opening up the vineyards and marae and places that farms and having that option. It's so cool. What kind of things have you guys had to upskill along the way to go from the commercial and technical side to creating like a thing?
Well, I guess for me, I came purely from a technical background, but as a director of the business, I end up doing PR, podcasts, and I've produced a video, and you sort of end up just doing anything that the business needs to have done. So it's exciting, and we just...
Yeah, and I think, as Brady says, every day is a learning day. It's hard to sort of put a finger on exactly what have you learned, because there's been so much. For me, I didn't come from a technical background. I came from sort of an investment background, and so had to really upskill in and around digital marketing, which has been great, and get help from a lot of people with that. Had to learn to ask for help. I think that was a big thing. Swallow your pride, get out there. You don't know everything. You've got to be willing to ask. And then with the space that we play in the sharing economy, that's all new ground. There's not many people you can go to and say, "Hey, how did your sharing economy business work?" And there's been a huge amount of learning in and around how the sharing economy works, how to motivate people to participate in it. And understanding that the sharing economy in some regards is great and, flavour du jour, flavour of the moment. But in other regards, it's actually twice as hard, because you've got to sell twice. You've got to sell to both sides of the table. And so that was a big bit of learning.
And it only really works at scale, right? Like if you're only taking a small percentage, you need a lot of customers.
And you also need scale to actually moderate the community. Like no one cares about their reviews if they're not worried about wanting to use it again.
Exactly.
And you can't control the quality. Like this is something where people providing cleaning services and just offering a platform rather than having them as employees keep running into trouble around the world.
Yeah.
But you guys maybe have a bigger pool to kind of draw on.
Well, I guess the other thing is that unlike Freedom campers, we actually know our users. We know their license plate number. We know we've got their driver's driver's license details. We've got their bank account details if they're a host, and we've got their credit card details if they are a user. So in our T's and C's, if they're badly behaved, we can actually find them and all that kind of thing. So there are some other controls, but I guess the first strategy is self-moderated through reviews. Yeah.
And what keeps you guys up at night? Like, what's the thing that you wake up at 2 a.m. and go,
Oh, there's any number of things. I mean, I think because there's so many moving parts to the business, I've got a very busy mind keeping track of, different releases, and, I'm releasing apps and website and front end and back end, and there's just lots of parts of the business, and I think that's the hardest thing to keep juggling.
And for me, it's growth, really. What keeps you up at night is are we hitting our growth numbers? Are we growing as strongly because as I said earlier, we're a wide ownership business. We've got a lot of really great and loyal supporters, and it's up to really Brady, myself, and our third co-founder Warwick to see that those guys' expectations are met. So that means growing as fast as we promise we will, and that's what keeps you awake at night. And growth is a function of heaps of stuff.
Do you have any words you live by, or mottos you come back to, or things that you lean on?
So we've got some clear values in both businesses, but we're trying to be game changers. That's really important to us. We see a problem, we're trying to actually make a difference, and we think that the tourism industry is a little bit staid, and I think that Campable is a game changing platform.
Mm-hmm. How about in terms of like the disruption piece? Whereas Uber, the biggest standard bearer for this kind of sharing economy disruption, they've had that concept that if you're going to disrupt an industry, sometimes you have to be an arsehole. And like, to me, I think it's fantastic that they're coming undone from that attitude at last.
So I don't believe you need to be an asshole. In fact, I think the inverse is true. I think that sharing economy businesses are about creating a platform. You do have to sell to both sides. That means, if we were Uber, I'd be saying that means your drivers and your travellers, your passengers. In our case, we do have a method by which we prioritise our behaviour, and we refer to it as hugging our hosts and high-fiving our users. That's a blatant plagiarism that we stole off another business, Uber. But it's quite useful. But that said, it doesn't mean you need to be an asshole. I firmly believe you don't. I think, unless you genuinely embrace that and you're good to the people in your community, you're not going to have a growing business. And I think Uber are seeing a lot of backlash from it. Airbnb live in the sharing economy. They don't live like that. In fact, the inverse for them is true. Reviews both ways.
And do you guys have any advice to people sitting out there who they're thinking they've got an idea, it seems big, it seems like they might take the leap? What do you guys have to say after a couple of years of taking the leap?
Well, I think it's an exciting and interesting thing to do is to run your own startup business. It's a real emotional roller coaster. Like there's some really high highs and some really low lows. So you have to be prepared to have that uncertainty. But what I would say is validate your idea as much as you can before you start, because what's expensive and time consuming and difficult is software development. What's easier is if you concierge your idea and build the thing once. You don't want to be building it 2, 3, 4 times.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. Validate. You can do it for free these days. There's some amazing tools to even build basic digital products that you can test the idea with an audience. I think that's critical. And my second thing that I would add to that is don't do it alone. Like Brody, I hear a lot of ideas from people when we're chatting about businesses and startups and whatnot. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't know if I can tell you my idea. It's my little secret, or it's my thing." And you can't survive like that. There are ups and downs. So having a partner and a partner in the business is great to be able to have a shoulder to cry on, someone to support, someone to celebrate your wins with. But it's also critical for the skill set balance. Just that execution piece. You can't execute on your own. You need people around you. So that would be my piece of advice.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Toby Litton and Brody Nelson, for coming in today.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Thanks. Cheers.
Two of the co-founders of Parkable and now Campable that you guys can find by using the magic Google machine online. Thank you to Madeline Chapman for producing today, and thank you very much for listening. May I suggest that if you are a fan of The Spinoff, you head online to iTunes and download the Spinoff app that was interestingly also a product of Translate Digital, the company that Brody and Toby have together.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. And brought to you by The Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tamaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.